Welcome back to Shoot Punch Kick, where three former POWs from Brooklyn must defend their town from an army of rogue cyborgs while reviewing action films from the 80s and 90s. I'm Telly, joined as always by my legendary co-hosts Dash and Carlos. What's up, guys?
Feeling legendary. Feeling
legendary.
legendary.
Been a while. Yeah.
Class is back in session.
Yes, that's right.
I like that.
There we go. More puns. Let's see how many puns we can fit in.
Did you just freestyle that, or did you have that one saved?
No,
that was in the podcast.
You wrote that last night.
That was all freestyle? Nice.
Yeah.
That was pretty good.
That's on a Post-it note on his desk. Yeah.
Take that off the monitor.
So today we're diving into the dystopian sci-fi action genre with Class of 1999. Well, returning to the dystopian sci-fi action genre, which we did a couple episodes ago with Demolition Man, with Class of 1999, the 1990 sequel in spirit to Class of 1984, also directed by Mark L. Lester. And this is a film that blends cyberpunk aesthetics with violent action, delivering an over-the-top take on the dangers of a lawless future. Thank you, ChatGPT. Okay, so looking forward to this one. This was one of those movies for me that was on my bucket list during COVID, of like movies that I always like wanted to see growing up, and finally got a chance to watch while I was home during the pandemic.
Oh, so you didn't see it back then? This is your first time?
I didn't see it originally. I remember seeing the trailers and being like, oh man, that's so cool. But how about you guys? What's your Carlos? We'll start with you. What's your personal history with this movie?
So I know for sure that I had seen this movie before. When you mentioned it last week, a couple of images flashed to my mind. So I know I saw it, but I didn't remember where I saw it or the scenario behind it, or really anything else about the movie. So, I mean, again, it's not my first time seeing it, but basically it was, my first time seeing it.
I keep my thing is I even up until 5 seconds before this podcast, Class of 1984 was just the only movie that I could think of. I don't know if I even heard of this movie, but saw Class of 1984 a few times. Really, you were giving us like hints about this movie. You were like, Pam Grier is in it. It's from this year, and I just just did not. Yeah, I just never heard of it. And then the more you talked about it, I was like, I'm pretty sure you mean Class of 1984. So this was a first time watch for me and a new introduction to this movie.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Okay, yeah, I know this movie got a very small release, but I remember seeing the commercials they were on like crazy when I was in junior high school. But one of those things where back in the day during the video store era, I did see Class of 1999 Part 2, which we'll talk about later, but they didn't have Class of 1999 Part 1, so it was at the mercy of the video store. That's really crazy to me,
because I'm trying to think of, usually when I would watch these kinds of movies, it would be with you guys. So it's a little crazy to me that you guys haven't seen this. It must have been one of those, no one was around, and I just, pulled it from the video store, because I definitely saw this, but...
I feel like if I saw the box, because we were talking about it before, I watched this streaming and just typed it in, and the video played. So looking at the box for the first time now, I feel like if I seen it, I would have been like, yeah, let me pick that up. I mean, it's cyborgs would have been the future at the time, and punks. Like that's so on brand.
I was a sucker for any VHS box that had a half human, half cyborg face on it in the 90s. I would be like, that's a rental.
Still am.
Yeah, I know, right?
So let's go into the plot synopsis. Thanks to ChatGPT. And here we go. In Class of 1999, the near future of 1999 sees high schools overrun by violent gangs. Sounds like the present. Leading the government to deploy experimental AI-driven android teachers to restore order.
Definitely
These
the president.
cybernetic enforcers, led by Dr. Bob Forrest, played by Stacy Keach, soon turn homicidal, forcing gang leader Cody Culp, played by Bradley Gregg, to take a stand against them. Okay, nice and simple.
Yeah, it did.
And before we dive into it, Dash, let's start with you. Initial reactions.
I thought the premise was pretty cool. I thought that they did some decent setting up of the world at the beginning, but overall a little underwhelmed. I think with the name class in the title, I thought that they could have leaned a little bit more into the school part. I just feel like it was bookended with like the beginning and the end. And if I'm comparing it to like a movie like the Faculty, that was like, this is what the students are doing, this is what the faculty is doing, there's a football angle. I just thought that the school just seemed like this movie felt like it could have worked without the school. Right, like it could have just been gang culture and machines being like deployed in an urban setting. So I thought they could have did a little bit better job with just leaning in and exploring the like school aspect of it, where it's like this militarized disciplinary force being the thing to get kids back to learning. But I did have fun with it. I thought the one-liners were really cool. I don't know how much will stick with me, but I was a little underwhelmed with it overall.
All right.
Carlos. To your point, Dash, I think that the movie's at its best actually when it's in the school. I think that some of the stuff outside of the school just didn't really work for me as much. Overall, I thought that the movie, this is a movie that's very well serviced by its premise. I think it's like a really, really cool idea. But in execution, it was okay. I mean, you could really see its budget on screen a lot of the time. The writing was just par for the course. I understand now why it was that I know I had seen it, but it didn't really stick out or was anything that like I would stayed fresh with me. Just because for me, I think it was just kind of run of the mill for B movie action schlock. I had a lot of fun with it, but I didn't necessarily think it was like a great movie. It was pretty run of the mill, and I had fun with it. Understanding what it was or what it was trying to do.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I agree with both of you. This is a goofy, fun B movie. It is what it is. You watch it while you're eating your dinner, and you have some fun with it, and you get on with your day. And you go and take a dump and go to sleep. So some little bit of background on the film. It was released on May 11th, 1990. And this was, as I mentioned, directed by Mark L. Lester, who is probably best known for directing Arnold in Commando and also directing the original Class of 1984, as well as Showdown in Little Tokyo with Brandon Lee and Dolph Lundgren a couple of years later.
Nice shout out.
So let's dive into this movie. So the premise, cyborg teachers in a high school. What's funny is that some of these scenes in this movie, it reminds me a lot of the John Lovitz movie, High School High. I don't know if you guys ever saw it.
Okay.
Where it's like a militarized high school. And every time I rewatch this movie, I think of that movie, which I
haven't thought about that movie in so long.
Yeah, no, that was a memory activated.
Yeah. There you go.
It's funny too. I think it might have come out around the time too. I didn't really look into this, but I think that they were already Dangerous Minds had come out and maybe like Lean on Me. So there was a lot of like teachers in schools with students that like had run amok. And I like the idea that somebody was like, what if we took that same, like what's normally an inspirational story of teachers getting these students, who have run amok like in line and make the teacher a cyborg. And make the students who have run amok the good guys, right? And so I think it's an interesting flip on that concept. And then, like, I wouldn't want to see this as a big budget movie. I feel like its space in the B is firmly planted in the B movie space, like works perfectly for the concept. And so I did appreciate that.
Yeah, I just felt like they went so hard in certain aspects of it that. Like, just make the school out of control. Like, at the beginning, they had this, like it was like they kind of took over the whole town, and, like, the security guards were, like, stabbing the kids. And I was like, all right, wait, then if they're doing all that, what are the machines doing?
Also, and also, I thought it was funny, just the idea that, like, these aren't just regular gang, kids, like, having knife fights after school, like, robbing stuff. These are full-on gangs with RPGs, AK-47s, having like military style shootouts. Like, once you get to that point as a gang, why are you going to school?
That's a big question.
You can't have a trick test in the
some
morning.
Of the reviews that we'll get into later. Like, why do these people bother going to school?
You gotta have a plan B.
but the story, so the story of Class of 1999 is by Mark L. Lester, who, as I mentioned several times, he did Class of 1984, which is about students run amok in a high school and a teacher having to defend himself. So I think Class of 99 came about where he was thinking, okay, crime and all this stuff and violence is getting so bad at schools now in the 80s. And you think about where things would go in like another 15 years, and this is pretty tame by that standard, right? This is just like kids acting badly in this school.
Mm-hmm.
They're not like shooting each other in the school, at least. But the screenplay was by C. Courtney Joyner, and if that name rings a bell for any of you B movie fans, he's best known for writing and directing a bunch of Full Moon movies like Puppet Master 3 and Transfers and whatnot. And you kind of see that at the end when the robots go into like action figure mode.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously this movie borrows a lot from Terminator, RoboCop, Warriors, and just like the overall bad high school genre.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, I thought there was, and you guys probably agree, there was a lot going on and also not enough going on at the same time, where it's trying to tell all these different stories, and it just feels like pick a lane and make it about the students or make it about the robots, but it's kind of all over the place. And I've never seen an episode of Goosebumps, but as I was rewatching this again for today's episode, I was like thinking like this could be a cool like young adult like movie about like a bunch of 13-year-old kids, like maybe a Stranger Things type of kind of nostalgic like movie or something about kids that discover their teachers are actually cyborgs.
Hey,
Shout out to my dude who's actually a writer
message
on that show.
I'm sorry, guys. I got an error message on my screen. Picture-in-picture mode is closed to maintain recording quality. It's causing a strain on your device. We close it to prevent from affecting the recording quality. Check your device specs and try again. Are you seeing any issue with my recording? Can I just ignore this? And
I mean, now you're actually in sync. Before
I know you were
out of sync
before. You're like a kung fu movie before.
All right.
You would stop
okay, fair enough.
talking
I just didn't know.
Yeah, so it might be helping you. Whatever that shut down is working.
All right, perfect. Then, my bad for cutting this off.
No, and it's still saying that it's uploading. I would just keep checking to make sure that.
It says that 99% uploading. Gotcha.
Yeah, well, now it went to 98, so I would just give it like another second and see if it goes back up to. It's at 99, so I think you should be okay.
Okay.
Or do you want to stop it and then just restart it?
I mean, if it's recording fine.
I mean, I have no way of like fully knowing, but it looks like it's going. It'll never be 100%, but it's at 99, so I assume.
I mean, it just gave me an error message, but it seems like it hasn't stopped us from recording.
Yeah,
so
you're in sync.
If it ain't broke, so
yeah. Cool. Okay. Let's take it from the top. No, I'm just
okay. Yeah. Welcome back, guys.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. You were saying shout out. I think Dash, you were saying shout out to you if we wanted to find a
yeah.
You about to give a shout out to.
Yeah. No, I was a Goosebump reader from from back in the day. Shout out to the Scholastic school fair. But I would say like the thing that I had against this, which was weird because it was so gang focused, and I feel like it reminded me of, and when you're saying that it would make like a Goosebumps or kid movie, there's no like real group like the way like Lost Boys was or the Warriors. Like it some of it seemed like really odd choices, but it was like so one character focused, and then they set up like little side characters here and there, and then they team up kind of towards the end, but I just felt like it was a little isolated as like a group movie, and I think that's would have like I feel like when you watch kids movies, there's usually like a group of them. Like it's rarely one kid going at it alone. I think that's more of like an adult trope of like being an action hero or something like that.
Well, I think to that point, I think what they were trying to express is the main character was like a head guy in the gang, and then when he came out, he was like he was trying to like go a different path and not wind up back there, and that's supposed to like set up his group, but they didn't really do a good job of showing them together, other than the two brothers.
Yeah. Well, the weird thing with that is like you generally do the person outside, and then you start the movie with them going back in, so you can get all your exposition in. You're like, oh, okay, like this person, this is how gangs work. Okay, but in this movie, they set it up with just the narration at the beginning, and like so many of those threads didn't pay out. because it was like, what was the movie would have been exactly the same if had he been in the gang. Like there was no reason for him to be out. Like, just even having the backstory of like he was in jail and then he's back in, like, because they were introducing this new program with the machine, so it didn't really buy anything. Like everybody was experiencing a new dynamic shift. Like it wasn't like it happened while he was in prison, and then by like halfway in the movie he's back in the gang doing all the gang stuff. So it was like, just have him in the gang.
Yeah, I think the script, the story, I think they weren't quite sure what kind of story they wanted to tell, and then the script also is kind of lackluster, to be perfectly honest. Where it's kind of all over the place. And I think Mark L. Lester is like, I could see him especially at the end. Am I making Die Hard? Am I making Terminator? Oh, maybe I'll just do everything. And cram it in there on a budget that obviously doesn't serve the scale of the story that he wants to tell. But let's talk about the cast. So I think this is probably a very impressive cast for this type of movie. A lot of familiar faces and even some established actors. So for all you Nightmare on Elm Street fans, Bradley Gregg from Nightmare on Elm Street 3, he was the one that got turned into a puppet with the veins pulled out. And part of the most memorable and horrifying thing I saw as a kid was that. He's the lead. I think he's basically doing a Corey Feldman impression throughout the film, which is not a good thing to do. So, and then you got Malcolm McDowell,
Crazy Eyes.
Legendary.
I'm sorry.
Oh no, not Malcolm McDowell from Clockwork Orange, which I think this is like a bit of an Easter egg. Stacy Keach is Mr. Crazy Eyes. Who was like Mike Hammer back in the day.
Planet of the Apes fame.
But I think the real stars of the movie are the three cyborgs played by Patrick Kilpatrick. Awesome name. Who's been in like everything, like Death Warrant and Under Siege 2 and everything else back in the 90s. Low budget movies, big budget movies. And then John P. Ryan, a shoot punch kick favorite here. He was in Avenging Force.
Can I just say, like, I do not remember him until we did this podcast, but now doing these podcasts, we're seeing these movies that I've seen before, and he's emerging as one of my favorite villains. I don't even think that he has particularly large range, but it's just something about his presence, chewing up every scene that he's in.
Are you talking about Patrick Kilpatrick or?
I'm talking about John P. Ryan.
Oh yeah, John P. Ryan. Yes.
He is becoming one of my favorite villains from all of these movies. Every time he's in anything, I can't take my eyes off him while he's on screen. He's really, really great. And he's playing basically the same character in all these movies, even if there's slightly he puts an accent.
He has the same affects. Yeah, that's one of the reasons I picked this movie, because I really appreciate his performance in Avenging Force so much that I want to revisit this. And he does he's like very Shakespearean the way he does his performance, and it's a shame he wasn't sort of the Stacy Keach role or given more to do. But of course, as I mentioned, Pam Grier. Apparently, this was like one of her first movies after her hiatus from the film industry, which is kind of a meaningless role. But so in retrospect, kind of surprised you would cast Pam Grier in this kind of throwaway.
You got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
That's what Quentin Tarantino saw. He was like, just the part here.
Well, it's funny because I think with these types of actors, it takes like a generation before like the kids that grew up with them become filmmakers and then start casting them again. So this was just like outside of that window of her kind of, past her heyday. And then a couple of years before, Tarantino says, I love Pam Grier. Let me put her in a movie.
But I mean, I could see saying yes to something like this from a pitch, right? Like maybe the script is like, there's a lot of satire involved. There's a lot of message of the state of education and military and all those themes that you mentioned earlier in the pod. And like I could see like, oh, this movie like has something to say. Like, the execution is,
that's how it was pitched. Yeah.
Yeah. So I could see someone being like, especially a PhD Pam Grier would be like, this says something about the state of education and where we are as a nation. And then they're like, so in the third act, you get hit with acid and your arms. But I could see saying yeah to this.
Okay.
Come on, this is the guy who did
I mean,
Commando.
yeah, I could see like this is because this was kind of the movie, the last like, well, this wasn't a big movie, but like Mark L. Lester, this was like his transition from making those big movies like Commando into doing direct to video movies.
Mhm.
But you know, everyone's gotta pay the bills and feed the cat. So
Oh yeah.
yeah, but in terms of the performances, Carlos, you already mentioned John P. Ryan. Completely agree with you. But what do you guys think of Bradley Gregg?
I have a hard time. I have a hard time buying him as this like, hard boiled gang kid. He just seeing him come out of prison and the way he's got that like he's doing the perp walk.
Yeah.
The bar slamming. I'm just not buying him. He's like too pretty. However, having said that, there's a point towards the end of the movie where he like has to give this. It's not really a rousing speech, but like he gets mad when they find out he's got his girlfriend, and he's like, "Yeah, we're gonna get them." And like, that part I bought. I don't buy him as a hardened gangster, but to be fair, I didn't buy any of the gang members as hardened.
I didn't buy any of them as teenagers because they were all like 35 years old. Yeah.
So I mean, in the grand scheme of things, I think it made sense. Like he's an unbuyable gang leader of an unbuyable gang.
Jump me in.
Yeah.
Jump me in.
Yeah.
His
Then
little
there was
brother,
Jason
too,
Patrick's
like-
brother. Yeah.
Yeah.
Who looked like a 35-year-old housewife from Long Island. But Dash, what do you think overall of the performances? Any standouts for you?
No, I mean, I think everyone was so close to the same. They were just like everybody was in a gang. They like I think that Bradley Gray could have been like the just student there, right? Like, did he need to be in a gang? And that could have been a little cool arc that he gets involved in it. But I think I just am a big Malcolm McDowell fan. Like, I was surprised to see him. I didn't really look up anything, and I just thought, like, as the principal, like, he's exactly who you want there. And he didn't do anything above and beyond, but he just came in Malcolm McDowelling. And I just love his presence in movies, and I hadn't seen him for a while, so he was really welcome once he showed up.
Yeah, I thought like he was wasted in the movie, knowing what he's capable of. The guy from freaking Clockwork Orange,
Planet of the Apes,
and I thought like Stacy Keach. I don't know what the fuck he was trying to do with that role.
He had the
apparently that was
ponytail and
his
the
idea
eyes.
to get the contact lenses and stuff. I thought there would be some surprise at the end, like, oh, he's a cyborg too, or
That's
whatever.
what I thought too,
That was one of the
very
images that came to
distracting every
mind.
time you're watching his scenes because all you're doing is looking into his eyes. It's like,
Yeah.
like Foster or something. Maybe he's
When
trying to
you
look
when
a
you
lot
said
like-
Oh, go ahead, Carlos.
I was just gonna say that when you mentioned this movie, Stacy Keach's crazy eyes, and the other thing was John P. Ryan taking that student, putting him over his knee, and spanking him. Those are the two
with
images
punch sound effects. Yeah, that was the best part.
that came to my mind. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Dash.
No, I was gonna say, who he looked like a lot. You ever see Double Dragon, the movie? Well,
Yeah.
the villain is Robert Patrick, and he has like the same exact look. It's like kind of like spiky white hair, but that rat tail was crazy work. in the
Diabolical.
back. When I saw it, I was like,
Diabolical
yo, I haven't seen a rat tail in a while, and like one that like prominent.
On a middle-aged man too. But
Yeah.
my theory is that Stacy Keach took this for the paycheck, and he just didn't want anyone to be able to recognize him being in this type of film.
They're like, you can't change all your features. He was like, all right, give me the contacts. It's the least I can.
Yeah, I think it was just like the equivalent of hiding behind somebody and not wanting to be exposed that you're doing these types of movies. But I thought, but speaking of Bradley Gregg, I just thought he was miscast. Rewatching this over, just not enough gravitas, and I don't know if I haven't seen enough of his work to know if it was the actor or just the way it was written or the direction. But I don't think the direction did him any favors. Also, in terms of the way he was shot and the way he was portrayed. Like he was supposed to be like leading this rebellion or something with his gang, but he just didn't seem to have that authority, even with his brother in the movie or anything like that. He was just like, he just felt like he would be like the friend that gets killed in a movie like this, as opposed to the lead.
Yeah, or
And I
to
think
Dash's point, like maybe he didn't need to be in the gang. Like I would have bought it way more if he was like the diligent student, just trying to like go to school and learn, and then he winds up having to link up with these gangsters, in order to take down a common threat.
Yeah.
The parallels with like a warrior is just too strong. What like these people like. It's kind of like Carlos, what you usually say about like like a badass, right? Like, how do you know someone's a badass? You
Other people.
show someone, and then you show someone beating that guy up. This guy's not beating up anybody, so he did not seem like anybody
But
who
then you
should be
see who
leading
the
anyone.
opposing gang member is, Hector, and he looks like a fucking pussy too. He might beat up that kid. So then all of a
Yeah.
sudden it kind of
He
makes
looked
more
like Pauly
sense.
Shore. That's what he looked like to me. He looked like a
Yeah.
Hispanic Pauly
Yeah.
Shore.
And his little brother too was mad annoying looking.
Mhm.
I don't know why he just
that
has a
brother is
punchable face.
Jason Patrick's half brother apparently, and he's
And who
like
was
the
the
director
other guy in
himself
the
now.
car? I feel like the other guy who
I've
was
seen him
like,
before. Yeah, the friend, right?
the friend. I feel
Yeah,
like
I've seen him before. I probably on like an episode of 21 Jump Street or something. I don't know.
well, because I was looking up the IMDb page for the movie, and I don't see him there, so
Okay.
I couldn't find him.
But let's move on to the direction. So obviously Mark L. Lester known for directing action movies, but I don't know if he's necessarily a good action movie director based on just the limited amount of work that I've seen him do. Before I get there, I just want to say I had a big problem with the way although I love the three actors playing the cyborgs, I thought their performance just didn't make any sense.
Mhm.
As cyborg,
Yeah.
they were just kind
Snarky,
of that
kind
would have made
of.
sense if that was going to be like a twist that oh shit they're robots, but that's established in like the first scene of the movie, and just the way they're behaving and just the body language. I just wonder if Mark L. Lester was even like paying attention to their performances, because there's choices that they make that don't make any sense if they're supposed to be these military robots, because that's the premise. They were sort of these military robots that have been battle droids that have been like decommissioned or something and now reprogrammed to become teachers. But just the way they react to each other, it's just like acting like normal people and not like robots.
Like they're like having fun with it. It seems
They're
like
making
they're making
jokes, they
snarky
got their hands in their
comments.
pockets, you know, things like that.
And it's funny because once they get like hurt to reveal that they're like, I am robot, and it's like, wait, like what changed?
Right. So there's
didn't
nothing. So I got to give props to like Arnold Schwarzenegger, because in the Terminator, everyone kind of jokes about that, like that's not a real performance. But you know, in this movie, I think it would have benefited from it if the teachers were a little bit more scary and robotic.
I guess that's not their fault, the actor's fault, right? I guess that's the writing and the directing, right?
Yeah.
That's all Mark Lester. I guess he wanted to, have somebody throwing one-liners in, and he didn't think any of his main characters had the charisma to pull it off. So you throw it to them. And again, like I said, back to, my guy John P. Ryan, if there's somebody on that, in the whole cast that has like charisma other than Malcolm McDowell, it's him. So, one of them, and it wouldn't have made sense if the principal was cracking one-liners. So,
yeah. What was strange before we got to Mark L. Lester, that the cyborgs had to live in a house together. Like,
yeah.
why wouldn't they just be in the lab that they
filled out paperwork too. It was like address. We live in the same. Like
I feel like Mark L. Lester didn't see Terminator or something like that. Maybe that's why this movie turned out the way it did. But speaking of Mark L. Lester, let's talk about direction. So this is an action movie. What I do appreciate from this movie and any B movie, that it knows what it is, and there's a lot of stuff going on to just keep you entertained. And there's there's like action every couple of minutes. There's a chase or a fight or something like that happening. But overall, I know Dash, you're a big Commando fan, so just give us some context how this fits into the Mark L. Lester filmography.
I mean, lots of extras, needless explosions, grenades like happening kind of constantly. And I think that wound up being, this wasn't the time or place for it, Mark. I think that was kind of the issue that I had with it, where, it was it felt like the movie was being stretched to accommodate these things that he's kind of known for or wants to use, like a bigger set piece, a lot of these actions like major shootouts, where I thought like keeping the movie confined to the school would have done it more favors. Than there's like I feel like just that whole kind of setting the gangs on each other, which was like a weird kind of plot thread, was really just to get the gangs fighting each other. And you could have done that like many different ways, but with that, I thought a lot of the Mark L. Lester-ness of it, because it's a little bit different with Commando. Like Commando, you go into fake Colombia, and you just give everybody green suits and they're doing all the same stuff. This one, I thought they did some cool stuff of like trying to make it that Mad Max feel of like dressing up the cars. I thought that was pretty within the realm of what they set up. I thought like little stuff like having the sign, like the not neon, but what's like the digital sign in the school that was like drug kills, and the bars on stuff. And I thought they did a pretty cool job of like dressing things up so that way as you're watching it, it reminds you of this world that they're supposed to be inhabiting. And with that, I thought some of the stunt work was pretty cool. Like, dude, even this is a B movie. So when you see a guy covered in flames being thrown through a window, that's like, practically that's, you have to have time to reset, put that guy out safely, a lot of moving pieces. And B movies can do it, but it's like you want the right people, you want to make sure that no one gets hurt, and I think like you would need an established director with experience that Mark L. Lester is.
Yeah, and Carlos, what do you think about the tone? Because I thought it was swinging from almost parody, not quite, because I feel like some of the scenes, like in the beginning when they're going into the school and they're collecting, there's like a pile of guns that they're collecting from the students. That's not played for necessary for laughs. I'm not sure what that they was trying to do there.
They got them though,
and yeah, because I feel like this, if they went all parody, it could have been funny, or if they were a little bit more serious, it could have been more gritty. But it kind of is in this kind of limbo. But what did you think about just the way Mark L. Lester handled the tone of the film?
So
what do you think would have been improved?
This movie is kind of a tale of two different movies. There's the stuff in the school, and then there's the stuff outside the school. And I find that the stuff in the school is far more effective than the stuff outside of the school. So in terms of tone, again, I'm sitting in for a B movie, a post, like we say, I don't want to say post-apocalyptic, dystopian, I guess is the right word, right? Where, the gangs have taken over. And when I see the jail, when I see him, the kid go home and see his parents, when I see the gang war happen, like none of that stuff was specifically interesting to me at all. Even the shootout between the gangs, just a bunch of people randomly firing heavy machine guns in random directions, right? It didn't seem choreographed at all. It just seemed kind of meandering,
right?
And the trying to get we're gonna have the two gangs come together, the little like investigation with his girlfriend, like none of that stuff really worked at all. The movie works best and is firing on all cylinders in the beginning when you're seeing the school and the students react to these teachers, but more specifically for me at the end when they're inside the school at nighttime. For some reason, there's fog all throughout the school, inside the classrooms. The Terminators have now revealed themselves as Terminators, right? You get some pretty gruesome kills, some pretty interesting, practical effects happening. Just the motorcycles running around in the gang. The lighting makes for some really interesting mood. So I feel like when it's firing on all cylinders thematically and just kind of the way it looks, works when I just wish the whole movie was like something like The Raid, where the whole movie is them in the school running away from these Terminators, right, at nighttime and finding cool ways to kill them. That would have been really cool. That was the best part of the movie for me. So
yeah, definitely
it's hot and cold.
Yeah, definitely the ending saves the film. What amused me a lot is that they're going to go in and try to ambush the teachers, so they're going to be very quiet by riding their motorcycles through classrooms and stuff.
Yeah. And I like the Terminators. The teachers pulled the Terminator with using the fake voice.
Yeah.
Which our hero saw through immediately.
I had to rewatch that part because it sounded like they couldn't get the actor to dub those lines, so it just sounded like Pam Grier, with a voice like a little deep,
like a modulator.
So, they didn't quite do the Timmy from Terminator 2. Yeah, but
it's just weird though. It just really felt though like the movie was assembled as they went. Like even with the school, and again to like bring it back to the faculty, like there's like some setups and then payoffs. So like for example, like the movie felt a little disjointed where you have this like set piece of like where they blow up the science lab with the Bunsen burners and stuff. Like that felt like that should have, like, you should have a science scene as opposed to a history scene at the beginning, right? Like you're sitting there, it's a callback to another moment, and it just felt like the later parts in the school were so different from the beginning scene parts of the school that it almost felt different. Like it was even lit very differently. I know that the end was nighttime, but it just felt almost like a completely different location, just like school, and that kind of is the thing that I look for with certain action movies, and especially from directors, of just maximizing the space, and you see what you have, and you do some callbacks, because all of these things they're free. Like, those are just ideas and, ways to utilize the space. And I thought that was a little bit of a missed opportunity in terms of the direction.
Well, speaking of that, I think the movie was, at least the first half of the movie is at its best when you have the teachers coming in, bringing order to the classroom. And they could have just had a couple more scenes like that, where just like the teachers disciplining the students and then setting that up for the ending. Like,
well, you know what? I felt like that a little bit. I usually feel like I think about when you're doing a movie like that, like I just picture writing wise, you would just like brainstorm, right? Like develop it, and you'd say, okay, we're making a movie in a school. What are the elements we'd have? Like test taking, pop quiz, coming in, lunchroom. And I thought they were going to lean towards that when the first robot was like, oh, he has PE next. And I was like, all right, we're going to start going through all the high school tropes of what does that look like in this world. And really it was like homeroom, gym, and then we're out of the school and we're in the teachers' houses, and it's night school now. And I thought like
rapes are happening in the front,
the teachers just killing the students no one
there's
seems
no other teachers in this school. They interact with no one else, and that was a bothersome part where I felt like there were enough actors in the movie to have some sort of like a semblance of like different point of views in the movie. But that's why I was saying like no one stood out to me, because it was like everyone's a gang or a robot or in this military department. Like there was no real in between aside from the actress, like the main actress in the movie.
Yeah. Well, when we get to the third act of the movie, it really goes from this sort of sci-fi movie, dystopian film to like almost like a horror movie with the body horror and all this kind of stuff, which now rewatching it again this time just feels kind of jarring, because we don't really set any of that up. But let's talk about just like the old school special effects. So for this movie, I just appreciate it I watch this as a time capsule film, and it just like takes me back to the 80s and watching like this is like this came out in 1990, but obviously it was probably shot in 89 or something. And it just feels very like the clothes that the kids are wearing, the effects, the kinds of performances you're getting. This feels very 80s. But I do, even though the effects aren't very good in the movie, some of the shots are good, but the effects themselves are kind of shitty. I appreciate this 100,000 more times than just like some shitty CGI effect that you would see like in a silent
Flash,
movie.
For example, like the last Flash movie. Yeah. This shit's on the most recent Ezra Miller Flash movie, which is crazy. The special, again, once you set yourself in the mindset that we're watching a B movie and it's going to be a budget movie, then you I don't want to say lower your expectations, because I don't necessarily think that practical low budget effects are any worse, but you just change your expectations. And again, one of the things that I feel sad about is that finally when that shift happens and you're in that third act, now we're starting to see, I mean, the only thing that you really saw that was kind of cool practical effects wise in the beginning was, I guess, when they're having that meeting in the very beginning and he pulls his face off. 1 million megabits, which is like nothing, but like and then it's not till like the end of the movie where like all of a sudden for a minute I thought I was going to see Pam Grier's tatas, but didn't get a chance to.
No,
and you get to see the gears and stuff,
stomach,
right?
Yeah.
And and then when Kilpatrick comes back at the like a very end and he's got the like half Terminator
It
face
looked
and half
nothing
not.
like
I
him
mean,
too.
it
Yeah.
looks nothing like him. It looks terrible, but still, you know, that's what I signed up for because I'm watching a B movie and this is what
Yes.
we're gonna see. And like, you know, part of it is like, look how ridiculous that looks, but that's kind of half of the fun, you know. And even some of the choreography in that last sequence, you know, you see a guy on fire, then a motorcycle a flaming motorcycle jump out of a window. Just everything about the way that last sequence proceeded, I thought was just way better than everything else in the movie. I just wish that was like the whole movie.
Yeah. No, it should have been like a Die Hard in a school with androids. That would have been
Mhm.
awesome. But
Yeah.
Dash, what did you think about? I thought the cyborg teachers were just dispatched too quickly and too easily. It just didn't seem like they put up much of a fight. But
And
overall,
then they
what
got
you
they
think?
got the guns and the arms
Yeah,
all of
yeah.
a
What do you think
sudden.
of
Like,
all
yeah,
that
that was
stuff that
dope.
going on at the end with the reveals of the special weapons and stuff? It just felt like something like a 12-year-old kid would dream up.
It
But I
did, and it
loved
felt
it.
like a little late.
Yeah.
The main thing, and just to go back to what you guys were talking about a little bit, I was surprised to see. So yeah, like this was made in the '80s, likely '89,
Hmm.
and I feel like so much of the like sense of it felt like if you like, I would have assumed '83. Like I'm surprised
Mm.
this movie came out in the '90s because there were so many movies leading up to it that did all of these things and a lot better of like, you know, this is 2 years after RoboCop, and even just like the wardrobe of like, you can see
Yeah,
this
but budget
stunted.
wise, man,
No, but I
you
mean
got it.
like
You
just
can't compare RoboCop.
in terms of the vision of like how the punks are dressed, we're
Mm-hmm.
comparing it to the Warriors. The Warriors like 79.
78.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah,
you know,
79.
like it just felt very like stilted in some ways. And I think like with the, you know, like they it all happens so fast and not even register, because I think like, you know, when you have like a movie like Terminator, his eyes fucked up, like, you know, in the first half hour, then it's a little bit his arm, and then it's this, and it was just like, hey, this person's a robot, blow him up. That
Hmm.
was like kind of the solution to everything, and a lot of them kind of felt like budget versions of what I've seen. So it was like
It
you know,
was.
Sarah crushing the Terminator. It was like we got a forklift, which we've
Yeah,
also
yeah.
seen in like
Uh-huh.
Aliens and, you know, different things. So I was a little underwhelmed with the non creativity of dispatching them, because I felt like everything was very an explosion, shoot a
Yeah.
guy,
Shooting in
you
the
know,
head.
in the
Yeah.
mouth kind of thing.
Mhm.
And it was like by the time they shot the dude, you know, and his blew his head off, you know, you saw like 50 people already be shot. By the time they blew up somebody, you already saw a guy, you know, doused in fire, thrown
Thrown through a
through a
window.
window. So it was like you kind of already saw those things, and I thought I didn't think the kills were too creative given
Mhm.
the things like, you know, and this isn't the idea, but like, you know, you have like a big magnet, you set up the magnet, you're playing with the idea that they're made of metal kind of situation, you know, like there's just
Yeah.
things like that. Or even just the having the callbacks of like the acid could have been a little bit more like resonate, because that was mentioned somewhere earlier, and you have like the nerd in class who's like, you know,
So
finally
go
gonna
through
shine.
anything.
He's been a
Mhm.
bullied the whole movies, and he uses his smarts to kind of do this stuff, but it was just like it felt like beat, you know, here's a beat, here's a beat, here's a beat, just
Mhm.
to get it
Oh, I mean,
to the different moments.
I want to be clear. Although all the praise that I'm giving to the third act of this movie, because it's the best part of the movie. Again, I just want to make it, as I said in the very beginning, this never really stuck out to me as a movie that stuck with me, and so it's very generic for, you know, movies of this ilk and of this budget.
Mhm.
So I mean, again, I'm trying to find it's faint praise, but I'm also not out here saying like, oh my god, they killed it in the end. I'm just saying that
Yeah.
of this
No,
very
and
mediocre movie, this is the best part of a very
but
mediocre.
and to that
Yeah.
point, like I do wish the tone, like there's such a tone shift, and the thing about the you could have presented those earlier scenes in a more horrific way, and not horrific in terms of just brutality, but I think like, them just popping up everywhere with the horror tropes, right? Like they can move maybe a little bit faster. They're places that you think that they wouldn't be. Kind of like what they're doing in the third act. And I just wish like that kind of tone was there instead of it feeling so disjointed. Because it gets
you got Pam Grier stepping on people's fucking feet with her heels.
Yeah,
that was the most damaging thing she did
Pam
at
Grier,
the beginning.
you could have made her do more things than just like firing a flamethrower out of her arm, but it is what it is.
And I think like you could have leaned into some of that stuff. Like, you take your skin hand off and crush a guy's head versus like, because they're so you like it didn't buy us anything. We knew that they were machines. So just having him, one of the machines like shove these drugs in his mouth was like, a human could do that. This other guy was just beat up by a security guard way worse than that. So there was like not as much differentiating them from anybody else until the end of the movie. But I will say like it was fun. And I think like you didn't need to go at 100 at the beginning. You could have got there. But it was just like they're basically humans at this point, for 70% of the movie until they're not. And then it was just like super just ramped
awesome
up.
Well, with that said, Carlos, favorite scene in Class of 1999?
I mean, again, not to sound like a broken record, but more than just one specific scene, I think just the tonal shift that happens from the moment they kind of get outside of the school. Even like I feel like the one-liners kicked up a little bit when they're inside the school. That whole like George Jetson nightmare. Like that from that point on, there was something that clicked in the movie, and I'm like, all right, I know I'm at the end of the movie, and I know what I'm about to get. And although I might have been bored with what I've seen over the last half an hour, I genuinely got engaged when that happened because I kind of knew what was going to happen, and so I can't just give it to one scene. I just think that entire final like sequence is the movie running on all cylinders. So,
okay, Dash.
For me, the earlier class scenes, I think like I didn't see enough of this movie to get pulled out of it yet. I was still on board with the promise of these like android teachers. And I really like the, leaning into the Terminator aspect of like, what do you say? And the, the on-screen visuals. And I thought that they were doing all of the beats of the, kids are bad. How do you address fighting? You pull them apart. How do you address someone who is high in your class? You're doing that stuff. So I thought some of the execution was a little weird with like the spanking and the stepping on the foot. But I did like the switch of, because at that moment it was doing the thing that the villains wanted it to do, right? Like they wanted to bring the violence down, get these kids learning. And I really liked after they beat up like a couple of the kids, like they were real silent, like they were all going through their stuff.
That would have got me in my chair.
So I like that because it was really the setting up this world, and I thought that the mix of that could have been a little bit better, but I was on board with it then.
Yeah, I mean, I love the out of everything in the film. I obviously love the final act. I do appreciate the homoeroticism of the John P. Ryan spanking scenes, because like he didn't have to spank the second guy, but they just threw it in. And like I mentioned earlier, just the fact that they someone decided, we're gonna put like these punching sound effects as he's slapping his ass.
I love the reactions from that scene where it was like the other students are just like, what is happening right now?
That's the bad touch teacher. Yeah.
So
there was a sequel to Class of 1999, which is the first one that I saw between the two films. And it was called Class of 1999 2, The Substitute, starring Sasha Mitchell, who was sort of like a B-movie direct-to-video staple in the 90s, and that came out in 1994. And the cover of that film was a image of Sasha Mitchell with like, a glowing red eye on the one half of his face. And I was like, oh, cool. And like another cyberpunk cyborg movie. I rented that movie, complete piece of shit. Never watched that movie. And I'll ruin it for you right now because he shows up to a school and he's supposed to be like another robot that was part of that program. And okay, I'm like, all right, well, there'll be a reveal at the end, right? Because he's walking around acting like he's a robot. But it turns out at the end, the twist is the budget saving twist is that he's not a cyborg. He's just some guy that's like crazy who thinks he's a cyborg, and then he
What?
just gets yeah, exactly.
Yo, did they do any of the point of view with the computer stuff? I don't remember.
No, I don't think they had
because
any
that
of
would
They
have
did
been
have a
that
point
would
of
have
view,
been
but
Yeah,
they
yeah.
didn't do the. I only saw it one time, and I was like, this is such bullshit. Because I think by that time everyone is groomed. If you're gonna do a Terminator ripoff, you got to have like the robotic effects and animatronics at the end. At least that
And
might
then you
save the
can't put
movie.
him with the eye on the box, and then it turns out he doesn't have the eye.
So
in the
it was just
movie.
like he was just crazy,
That is a womp
So yeah, never watch that movie. What a piece of bullshit. But
That is a womp womp.
And I can't believe when you said that I'm like, why does that name sound familiar? Cody from Step by Step.
Kickboxer 2.
Yeah.
He was in a bunch of he was in the Kickboxer sequels and everything.
And I
Yeah,
think
but
that may
Tony
have
from-
even come out right around the same time of the actual movie The Substitute,
Yeah, probably.
which is also about a
Yeah.
teacher who's
Yeah.
like.
They're like,
So-
what would have made this movie better if he was a robot?
That's
But
right.
Not really.
And obviously in the 90s and then late 80s there were a ton of these types of cyberpunk movies. Carlos, you and I, we have a lot of fond memories watching Nemesis, which I never returned to the video store, which was another cyberpunk like kind of Terminator-esque movie. But speaking of just like Terminator ripoff movies, any good ones come to mind for you guys?
TC 2000.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Billy Blanks.
I feel like a lot of them were like fake Arnold less than, like Terminator. But speaking of fake Terminators, Universal Soldier is like super fake Terminator. But I thought with this one, like that third act, like they did the things that you wanted to see with those. Because even
Rogue
like
2.
even a lot of the fake ones that I saw, they kind of shy away from like the effects part of it and don't like lean super into it.
Yeah,
and
that
I was
requires
surprised.
money. Yeah,
Yeah, and I didn't think that the effects were terrible when they had like the clearly like stop motion of like the half body, half machine, half
I don't
human,
know,
half
though.
machine, like walking.
Have you seen some of the effects that we did when we did Rogue with the stop animation motion with the tinfoil?
yeah. Rogue is a film that we tried to make back in the day when we were like
No
teenagers.
try. We did make. We made after
Yeah, we gotta
Terminator
include
2.
some
We made
scenes from
Terminator
that.
3.
Yes, and they did have green blood, just like the robots in this
It's green
movie.
like
so
your blood.
I
You
think,
guys need to get your money, man.
There you go. So just to wrap things up, this movie it had a budget of $5.2 million. It
Well spent.
underperformed at the box office. It only made about 2.4.
Also,
But
it
has
did come out
since-
theatrically.
Did it come out theatrically? Yeah. It
Oh, I
just
thought
got
it
a
was
small
straight to-
release. This was like back in the day when a low budget movie could still. This was like the end of the 80s where a low budget genre movie could still get some kind of theatrical release, even though it didn't make any money. But it did, according to IMDb and Wikipedia, it has gone on to gain a bit of a cult status on home video. And personally, I appreciate it for its charm of being just like, a no nonsense, silly B movie. Critical reaction, Rotten Tomatoes, has a 63% on the tomato meter and a 50% audience score. On IMDb, it scores a 5.9 out of 10, and on Letterboxd, 3.2 out of 5. Critics at the time, LA Times, Kevin Thomas said that Class of 1999 swiftly short circuits on unspeakable, incessant brutality and bloodshed. And these are the kinds of reviews that made me want to see a movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, so
Is that a bad
what do I sign
thing,
up?
And then Owen Gleiberman from Entertainment Weekly says it's a trashy teen derivative of the Road Warrior, Blade Runner, RoboCop, and every other retro future fantasy that director Mark L. Lesser could cram into the compactor.
Accurate.
I disagree because I
really?
feel like he didn't see Terminator. Because I feel like you put this side by side with Terminator, this probably had a little bit more money than Terminator, and it just goes to show like what a good script and really a solid director can get you versus like more money, just simply having more money and even like more famous actors. And then let's hear what the people have to say. And the fans. So on Letterboxd, David, in a review from 2024 November, calls Class of 1999 A stone cold classic from the early 90s. They sure don't make them like this anymore. Futuristic sci-fi setting with low production value? Check. Grisly violence every 10 minutes? Check. Wildly colored skin-tight leggings worn by blokes? Check. Bradley Gregg sounding like Corey Feldman? Check. Stacy Keach as an albino with a mullet eating a banana? Check. Malcolm McDowell acting for a paycheck? Check. Pam Grier? Check. Shootouts, explosions, motorcycle stunts, schools exploding. It's all here, folks. Do not miss this amazing flick. Bill,
I like it.
On IMDb, who gave it a 10 out of 10, says, for a movie of its time, it was really well put together. We cannot compare this type of movie to modern cinema. There is no CGI. It's makeup and animatronics. Cheesy as it is today, I feel that this class of 1999 makes for a great spot in anyone's movie library. Someone who did not like the movie very much on Letterboxd, who gave it a 1 out of 5, says, this is a terrible movie for some but for some reason I rewatch it all the time. The acting is horrible. Even though there are some big names in this, they still didn't bring anything to the table. You can see how low the budget was just from the look of the film. But if you like B movies and robot teachers that go on a murdering spree, you might enjoy this. Well said.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get to the SPK rating. Dash, we'll start with you.
All right. Well, this one, it's you got to know what you're watching going in, and it's weird because it's like the last few movies we talked about. It was like I was judging them on like films, like some of them were like bad movies, but I don't know why. Like this one, I was more on board with it. It never, it knew what it was. And it like I felt like it never tried to be anything more, and I think like the hype justified it. I think for some of the other movies, like especially like an Evil Dead, like I'm told this is like a cultural shift, so I go in there watching it, and it's like, you know, it's kind of a B movie. Where this one, I'm like, this is a B movie going in, and it was a B movie delivered. I thought it had like some fun parts that I would just like go on YouTube and like look up the parts, but I didn't like fully enjoy it, and I don't think I would really like watch it again. So I'm gonna give this 2 earrings out of your bowls out of 5.
Okay. Carlos.
So, watching this again, it totally makes sense to me why this is not one of the movies that stuck with me, that I watched over and over. I think that it was par for the course for an action movie with this budget that came out at around this time. It's one, in a slew of hundreds of other movies that were very much like it from this time. It did what it set out to do. I had fun with it. And so I'm going to give it 2.5 exploding Pam Griers out of 5.
Okay. Yeah, so I don't think there's anything particularly memorable in this movie. I think it's more of just the for me, it's the fact that it just reminds me of being like 13 years old again. And the premise is goofy, and it's just a very silly movie, but I love that. I can appreciate that. So I'm going to give this 2.5 denim Matador jackets out of 5.
And I just want to say real quick, sorry if you were still going to, I misspoke. I did mean to give it a 2.5, not a 2.
Oh, wow. Okay, so we're
no
unanimous.
take backs, bro.
No, because I was like, I like this, and let me give this like one of my lowest ratings.
Okay. Yeah, I think there. Do you think there's a good movie in here? If someone like were to redo it and just kind of overhaul it, there's something here.
Absolutely. I think it's like super timely with what's going on now in current times, where it becomes like, you know, that we're doing whatever with the Board of Ed. AI is at a super high point with school, you know, school incidents. I don't want us to get like potentially demonetized based on algorithm stuff. But there's, you know, one of the solutions they talk about is like, you know, arming the teachers, having more cops in the schools. And I think there's like a lot of satire and like room for a message within there. And I think, you know, with what we're doing with CG and stuff like that, and I mean, you know, like again, to bring it up again, that whole like the faculty of the premise of the Breakfast Club with aliens. I think the
Mhm.
Breakfast Club with robot teachers powered on a AI, which is like in everything right now. It's so relevant, and I think that with the right care and script, I think it could be a really cool movie.
All right, Dash.
Ditto.
Dash. Let's produce the remake of this, Carlos. Yeah, I think there's a good movie in here somewhere, and which is why I love watching these types of films where I feel like it's a good idea but executed not very well.
Mhm.
But
I actually
maybe
think there's
someone will
two good. There's
revisit
two good
this.
movies in here. There's
Yeah.
one that covers all the things that Dash was talking about. That could be, like a big budget film. That could, have really flashy special effects and maybe tell a story, about the current climate. But I also think that there is a really good B movie in here as well that you could make to just again find an excuse to have a bunch of kids getting chased around by Terminators inside a school, and you
Mhm.
can
Yeah.
make it really low budget and really kind of dumbed down. And I think that would be a lot of fun, like maybe like a Netflix movie, original movie or something like that. That would be a lot of fun too.
Yeah.
All right, that sounds good to me. So let's throw it over to Dash for next week's pick.
So this movie is one that I almost don't even have to watch again. I know damn near every line by heart. It's really near and dear to me. Saw it in theaters, and this is, I think, one of the best comic book movies ever made. I'm going with next episode. We will be watching the 1990 movie Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Nice.
All
Okay.
right, I
Me
saw
too.
that
I
in
know. I know
theaters.
lines. I know lines from. I saw that movie. I want to say maybe 5 years ago, and it's crazy that I was still repeating the lines, like oh, a fellow chucker, eh?
I mean, with all the
Awesome.
stuff like the Marvel and there's certain things like kind of getting back to it, like that like sense of street stuff. But it's weird. Like you watch like Daredevil and certain movies that are trying to get like that gritty New York stuff back. And I mean, to another 1990 movie, most likely made in 89,
Mhm.
and just this is one of those, like, every once in a while when we do the pod, I'm just like, oh, this is something that I've seen a lot, but I never really talked to people and like really, what did you think about this? How did you feel about that? So this is a movie that I'm really looking forward to
Yeah,
talking
Wasn't
to you
this, I
guys
think, at the
about.
forward
time
to
the most
revisiting
violent
that
movie
one.
ever made?
I'm sorry, what was that?
What?
I think at the time it was the most violent movie ever made.
Yeah. It was like
Time it
this in
came out?
Rambo 2. Is
Yeah.
like literally.
That's awesome.
All right. Well, thanks all of you for tuning in again to Shoot Punch Kick. Please like, comment, and subscribe for more breakdowns of 80s and 90s cinematic violence. And please hit us up on our social media and comment below. Let us know if there's a film that you want us to watch.
Yeah.
And we'll see you next time.